Okay, number two, this one, I hope everyone understands where I'm coming from with this one, but I don't think that everyone has to go fully vegan.
Hey, what is up guys? So Brian Turner made a video where he went over some of the things that he disagrees with vegans on, which he thinks that most vegans actually agree with. So I'm gonna go over today what those things are and what I agree with and what I disagree with in terms of what Brian said. Now before I go on, I want to say that I actually really do like Brian Turner. I was actually watching his videos way back in the day during my fitness obsession days before he was actually vegan. I think he's a pretty genuine dude. I've heard a lot of people say things about him like, oh, he's just another health vegan, or he's destined to be an ex-vegan, like people like, I don't know, Maddie Limburner and John Venus, which I mean, I guess technically John is vegan again. But you know what I mean? Like people just view Brian Turner as somebody who is destined to be, you know, another ex-vegan who is doing it for health. But I don't actually think that. I think that Brian actually is a pretty genuine guy, and I think he's destined to be an ethical vegan. But anyway, let's get on with the video. So the first thing I'm gonna go through are the things that Brian said, which I agreed with, and then I'll move on to what I disagreed with. So the first thing he said was that he doesn't love all animals. Now, I'm very on board with this. I don't know what it means to even say you love all animals. Me personally, like, you know, mosquitoes are sucking my blood. So it's kind of hard for me to just be like, yeah, I totally love mosquitoes, especially when they try to take away my blood. Like obviously, I don't really love them. And there's other bugs too that are pretty annoying and damaging and other animals. So I mean, obviously you don't need to love all animals to be vegan. Now, Brian said at some point in the video that he respects all animals, and I agree with that. I mean, like that's probably what's more important when it comes to having vegan values. Like I know a ton of vegans who aren't necessarily massive animal lovers, but they understand logically that animals don't want to be stabbed and exploited and killed for human benefit, and therefore we shouldn't do these things to animals. The next thing that Brian covered, which I agree with, is the fact that it's vegan and okay to get vegan items and plant-based items from non-vegan businesses, like, you know, buying rice from Walmart. I've actually made a video on this in the past on how I think it's okay to do this, and mainly because you don't really generate demand for animal products in buying a plant-based product from a non-vegan company. And obviously, if we made the standard for veganism that you can only buy stuff from vegan companies, 99% of businesses would not be able to be within the confines of veganism, making veganism much less practical and giving us a much less practical message to give to the public. Imagine if we were saying to people like, oh, you want to go vegan? Well, you can't actually shop at 99% of shops around the world. You can't go to Walmart, you can't go to, you know, a random grocery store and buy rice or apples or whatever, because those businesses aren't vegan. We would surely have a much harder time getting people to go vegan. All right, so the next thing he said was that veganism is not tied to any political or religious belief. I totally agree with this. I think this one is pretty clear. I mean, veganism is simply a moral philosophy. It lies nowhere on the political spectrum and requires no religion to adopt. When it comes to politics, I mean, just think about how weird it would be to say that being against animal abuse is tied to a specific political party. All right, so the next thing he said, which I agree with, was that he would save a human being over a non-human animal in a situation where you had to choose one or the other. Now, I don't think this is too controversial to say. I mean, if you're a vegan who has an interest in maximizing well-being, I would hope that in having to choose between a cockroach or a human, you would save a human. I of course understand that there are people, even non-vegan people, who would save their own dog over a human that is a stranger, probably out of being emotionally attached to the dog and therefore compelled to save them. But when I think of this hypothetical, I like to assume that both the human and the dog are strangers to you. In an effort to generate more well-being, I would save the being who has the higher capacity to generate well-being. And Brian mentioned how some people will call this speciesist. But the thing is, the decision has nothing to do with species, but instead sentience. Just to prove this, I want you to know that if there was a hypothetical super sentient dog and a human, it would be my moral obligation to save the dog instead of the human. My decision would have nothing to do with species. Now onto the main thing that I didn't really agree with Brian on, and I'm gonna play the whole clip so that I can't be accused of, you know, taking him out of context and whatever.
Okay, number two, this one, I hope everyone understands where I'm coming from with this one, but I don't think that everyone has to go fully vegan, and I don't think that it's really realistic either. So let me break this down a little bit. So the way that I think about it in numbers, right, is that the animals don't really care whether you're 100% vegan or if you're 80% vegan. They just care if they're getting killed and eaten, right? So the way I think about it is I break it down by numbers, right? So if 80% of all people went 80% vegan, in my opinion, that's better than if 50% of people went 100% vegan. Now, follow me on this. If 80% of people went 80% vegan, that would be 64% of their diet was plant-based. Now, you might think that it might be better if they're 100% vegan, but if 50% of people went 100% vegan, only 50% of people's diets would be plants. So by numbers, there's actually 14% less animals eaten by the majority of people going mostly plant-based rather than half of the people going all the way plant-based. Now, in an ideal world, it would be super dope if 100% of people went 100% vegan. The world, climate, everything's gonna do better with this. Health is gonna do better with this. Let's just stop hurting animals. I would love if everyone realized that, but just being a realistic, pragmatic person, I just don't believe that that's ever going to happen. But I do think that the narrative, if the push is more towards pushing people to go more and more plant-based, as much as they can go and as much as they can, push themselves to be, I think it's going to end up having a lot more people move that that needle more towards the plant-based diet. But if the rhetoric or the narrative is that you can't have anything at all, you have to be 100% eating plants, I think a lot of people won't even try. They'll say, that's not for me. I could never do that. How many times have you experienced that? When I introduce people into plant-based dieting or veganism, especially when they ask me for my opinions, I always say, take it one step at a time, go as slow as you want. Even if it took you 2 or 3 years to really get into it, that's way better than trying to go 100% plant-based by tomorrow.
So I'm not going to disagree with the numbers he presented. I mean, obviously that makes sense. So here's the thing though. I don't think that the dichotomy he presented is really there. I don't think that you can only either aggressively order somebody to go vegan fully or say, hey, you can just go mostly plant-based. Of course, it is always going to be less pressure to eat a mostly plant-based diet rather than fully pursue a vegan lifestyle. But the problem is that if you don't explain to people logically and philosophically what the actual moral issue is with using and eating animals, they're going to end up doing it long term. Also, aside from their 80% plant-based diet, they will still be purchasing things like leather, fur, going to zoos, etc. And that, of course, isn't within the best interest of animals. And I think there is a compelling and not so intimidating way you can explain to a person why they should aspire to be fully vegan. This is how I do it. Okay, so what I'll do is, in a very down-to-earth way, just explain to people what animals go through for their food to get to them, for leather to get to them, what happens in zoos and circuses and all these other things and means in which we use animals for human benefit. Then I'll say the way to which you can not support these things and not put them in demand is by going fully vegan. Now I understand that in your head right now, going vegan seems like a big thing and it's like, oh, how am I gonna go vegan? Like, oh my God, that's such a big lifestyle change, whatever. So I'll tell people like, listen, going vegan instantly is the most moral thing you can do, but it isn't always the most practical. So do your research, take your time and get there when you need to. Of course, you should be doing this as quick as possible for the sake of the animals. They don't really want to wait for you to stop funding their torture. But yeah, I mean, just know there's plenty of vegan alternatives out there. It's not such a big thing over time to be a vegan. For me, it's basically second nature. It's not that big of a shift at all. And really, I mean, just understand that a year from now, after trying to fully implement the vegan lifestyle, this is not going to be anything that you even think about. It's going to be a very simple thing. And yeah, I mean, like, you're going to have all these different things like animal products in the form of plant products, like mock meats, mock ice cream, mock cream cheese, mock pizza, all these different things, mock milks. It's very simple. So again, I agree that more animals would be saved with most of the population eating mostly plant-based versus half or a third of the population living a full vegan lifestyle. But long term, if the goal is animal liberation, it makes sense to help people understand, assuming they're not a psychopath, that morally, going 100% vegan is the right thing to do. And it is certainly possible to persuade people to do this, just like it is possible to persuade people to eat 80% plant-based. You can calmly and intelligently explain to people why going vegan 100% is the right thing to do. you can explain it in a very down-to-earth way, which doesn't make the person feel uncomfortable or that they have to change overnight. Also, I don't think the morally right thing to do is to encourage people to have a cheat day from their morals.
Every once in a while, if you have to, then have a cheat. You can, go eat whatever it is that you normally used to eat before you started the plant-based diet. Because if that's what you need to do every 4 months, 6 months, year, or whatever, to stick with it, then I think that's a lot better than if you just don't do it at all because it's too scary, too daunting to go 100%. Or if you try for a long time, then you fail because you can't stick with it.
I get Brian was saying that maybe those cheat days are what are needed for them to stay plant-based long-term, but I don't see why we can't just encourage these people to indulge in vegan mock products instead. They taste nearly, if not fully identical, and are getting better every year, and don't require breeding, exploiting, and murdering innocent beings. Alright guys, that is the end of the video. As you can see, I really only disagreed with one of his main points. And yeah, I don't think it's really good or helpful to promote the fact that you can go 80% plant-based when there's a way to convince people to go fully vegan that is equally as intimidating as telling them to go, 80% plant-based. Just be chill with people, explain to them that it is a process, that there's plenty of mock products, and that just to take their time and not feel like they need to go and switch overnight, because a lot of people in the midst of first hearing about veganism think veganism is this huge thing, this huge shift. But as you guys know, and the vegans watching, going vegan is actually pretty easy. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird,